You know, one of the most common emails I get is from new Masons who are just completely disillusioned. They expected this profound journey of enlightenment, and instead they found something totally different. And what's wild is that their experience connects back to an ancient philosophical story that, believe it or not, explains exactly what's going on.
That sentence, wow, it just gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? It's this feeling of being cornered, of being hopeless. And it's coming from someone who joined Freemasonry looking for the exact opposite. Brotherhood, wisdom, and freedom of thought. And here's the thing, it's so important to understand that this isn't just a one-off thing. This feeling of being trapped is incredibly common. It points to this huge gap between the promise of Freemasonry and the reality that so many people find when they walk into their lodge. So how does somebody get to that point? Well, the path is almost always the same. A guy gets interested, he studies this incredibly deep philosophical system, he's excited, he joins, ready to learn and grow, but he finds what feels more like a social club. So he thinks, okay, I'll try to help. He tries to introduce some educational programs, book discussions, talks on symbolism, anything, and he just hits a brick wall of resistance. Before he knows it, his passion gets him a new title, the troublemaker. It's just a super frustrating cycle, right? And it leaves these really good, well-intentioned Masons feeling totally defeated. So what is really happening here? Well, to understand the dynamic, we need to go way back, like all the way back to ancient Greece, to a story that perfectly maps onto this very modern problem.
Yeah, we're talking about Plato's Allegory of the Cave. It's this brilliant story he came up with to show the huge difference between true understanding and just perceived reality. Or to put it in his words, the effect of education and the lack of it on who we are. Okay, so picture this. There are these prisoners who've been chained up in a dark cave their whole lives. All they can see are shadows dancing on the wall in front of them, and to them, that's reality. That's the whole world. But then one prisoner breaks free. He climbs out into the sunlight, and at first it's blinding, it's painful. But then his eyes adjust, and he sees the world for what it really is, in full color, with real trees and real people. He's so blown away, he feels like he has to go back and tell his friends the truth. But when he gets back down into the darkness, his eyes can't adjust. He's stumbling around. The other prisoners don't see an enlightened man. They see a guy who's been broken by the outside world. They think he's crazy, and they actually threaten him for trying to mess with their reality. Okay, so what in the world does a 2,000-year-old story about prisoners in a cave have to do with a Masonic lodge today? Well, as it turns out, the parallels are kind of shocking. Okay, let's break this down because this is where it all clicks. The dark cave? You can think of that as shadow masonry, a version of the craft that's all form and no substance. The shadows on the wall? That's the superficial lodge routine. Open the meeting, read the minutes, pay the bills, close the meeting. No real learning. The prisoners chained to the wall? Well, those are the members who are perfectly comfortable with the way things are. They like the routine. And the escaped prisoner, that's our new enthusiastic Mason who has seen that there's something more, something deeper, and he wants to share it. And this right here, this is the absolute core of the conflict. For a Mason who has spent decades, maybe 20 or 30 years, in a lodge where the routine is the entire experience, that's not a superficial version of Freemasonry to them. That is Freemasonry. The shadows on the wall are the real thing, and anyone who comes in talking about a world of sunlight is not an enlightener, they're a threat. So, what do? How do you break that cycle? You can't just run back into the cave shouting about how bright the sun is and expect to change minds. Even Plato knew this. His solution was simple, but not easy. A slow, patient process of education. You just can't force someone to see the light. So this actually builds into a practical strategy. Instead of marching in and declaring everyone wrong, you start with humility. You go to a respected leader in the lodge and ask for their help, for their experience. Then, and this is the big one, you question, you don't correct. So instead of saying, you're doing this wrong, you could try something like, hey, I was reading this classic Masonic author, and he wrote this. What do you think he meant by that? See, it invites them into a discussion instead of a fight. It lets them see the light on their own terms. But man, it requires a ton of patience. Because at the end of the day, the goal has to be about real service to the craft. It's not about winning an argument. It's not about feeding your ego by proving you're the smartest guy in the room. It's about making the experience better for everyone. And sometimes that means you got to swallow your own pride for the greater good. But of course, there's that really tough question we have to face. What happens if you do all of that, you're patient, you're diplomatic, and they just
refuse? What if they refuse to even turn their head toward the light? This is where a pretty difficult concept from emergency medicine is actually really useful. It's called triage. It's that sober, sometimes painful process of looking at a situation and realizing you have limited time and limited energy. You have to decide where your efforts can actually make a real difference. And here's the harsh reality that comes with triage. If you spend all of your energy trying to convince a lodge that is determined to stay in the dark, you'll probably fail. And in the process, you'll miss the chance to help other people in other lodges who are actively looking for the light. As painful as it sounds, sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is to walk away. For those of you who have made it out of the cave, who have seen that bigger picture, you really do have a duty to help others find their way. But just like in Plato's story, you've got to know that this path has dangers. You need to be prepared. Be prepared for the fact that your efforts might not be appreciated. You could face a lot of criticism. You might get shunned or ostracized. Heck, you might even get labeled as the source of all the problems in the lodge, and people who called you brother one day might not be so friendly to next. That's the real risk of trying to change a reality that people have gotten very comfortable with. But ultimately, none of that should stop you. Because your primary duty isn't to make the people who are comfortable in the cave feel better. Your job is to be a Freemason, in the truest sense of that word. The mission is simple, even if the work is hard. Keep in the light, and share that light whenever, wherever, and however you can. If one door closes, you go find another one that's open. And so that leaves us with one final question, and this one applies to every single one of us, way beyond any lodge meeting. I want you to ask yourself, in your own life, what comfortable shadows are you accepting as reality?